ang hirap rin kasi dyan is that there are things around us like media and so many other things that kind of influence us into thinking na, oh, if you take medicine, it's gonna fry your brain. You're not gonna be the same person anymore. What if I go to therapy and they take away my funny? I always hear that. What if I go to therapy and they take away my funny? Dude, I've been in therapy for like 10 years. I'm still funny as fuck. Don't me.
Welcome to the 7 Dimensions of Wellness, the podcast that helps you reassess your habits and helps you progress. The 7 dimensions are as follows: spiritual, physical, emotional, career, intellectual, environmental, and social. Reassess, progress. This is the 7 Dimensions of Wellness. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Jerome Paul. Tonight, we have our first guest, and we are going to talk about the intellectual dimension. Yes, that's right. We're going to talk about misconceptions about common mental illnesses. So our guest for tonight, she is a psych major with over 7 years of work experience. She is a mental health advocate, and she is also clinically diagnosed with ADHD and OCD. So let's all welcome Una.
I like that intro. It's like a badge of honor.
Thank you. And since Gam isn't here with us tonight, I hope that, of course, Gam is doing well because he is kind of feeling a little under the weather. We do have another guest who will be guesting for another dimension for another day. She is a former HR manager with over 4 years of work experience. Let's all welcome Jean. Hi.
Hello.
Thank you. So, of course, the spotlight is going to be for Una tonight, and we can speak Tagalog. Okay, like we're gonna do this Taglish style since the audience is gonna be mostly Filipino. Yeah. So yeah, Una, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Okay. Oh man, that's kind of a loaded question, huh? But yeah, so like Paul said, I'm a psych graduate and I have a double whammy diagnosis of ADHD and OCD. The OCD I was diagnosed in 2012, so I think it's gonna be like about 10 years now this year of me just dealing with that. The ADHD was a recent diagnosis, and I received that diagnosis right before the pandemic in January of 2020. Yeah.
Oh, so it was just recent.
Yeah, it's pretty recent. I'm still hindi ko pa siya gaano kagamay as with OCD. So, it's been almost a decade of me dealing with the OCD. So, I kind of have a better grasp of that. With ADHD, it's still kind of fresh. I mean, I've always had it. That's the thing about ADHD and most of these diagnoses is that you've always had it, but it's just you're now learning how to deal with it. It's like, I'm 28, so it's kind of like a lot of unlearning has yet to be done. So yeah.
Oh, thank you. So, I'm a little bit interested, Una, kasi ngayon ko lang din nalaman that it was just very recent. We actually did this before with the podcast. Yeah, we had an episode about, mental health and mental awareness, but that took us 4 hours long. Okay, and it's difficult to edit.
Yeah,
So
I understand.
we're gonna redo the whole thing. There we go. But just to ask, right? What was it like to be clinically diagnosed? Like, how did it come about?
In general,
Yeah,
or just the recent ADHD?
in general, in general.
Okay, so this might get a little heavy. So trigger warning for anybody who's listening,
Thank you.
for suicide attempts. So back when I was in college, it was just to cut the story short, it was a really difficult time in my life. Something had happened that, um, I wasn't able to deal with it very well. Um, and then back then, this was like 2011, 2012, and this was a time when the issue of, or the conversation around mental health wasn't as prevalent as it was today. There were still people na, like you would come up to people and say like, "Oh, I think I need to see somebody about this," and they'd be like, "No, that's not a thing. That's marami pang ganun nun." Um, so yeah, um, I was dealing with a lot of stuff, and I was just in blatant denial about it. There wasn't uh, yun nga, in the first place, like there wasn't very much conversation about the whole topic of mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then it just came to a point that I couldn't deal with it anymore, and I tried to take my own life,
Oh.
3 times. The third attempt, that one was the worst one, because that had happened in public. I tried to jump off a building, in one of the school buildings. So it was like this entire spectacle. And yeah, and then the school had to call my parents and everything. And
Mm-hmm.
before all of this happened, I had already asked my family, na I think I need help. And at the time kasi hindi pa nila alam so I couldn't really blame them. Like now they're informed and they're educated. But back then it was a situation that it was like, no, wala yan. Um, yeah, tapos it had to come to that point before, they had to take me to a hospital. They put me on suicide watch.
Mm-hmm.
I had to be sedated and everything. It was, you know, it was just wow.
Yeah, overwhelming.
And yeah, I don't even think that's the word for it. It was just
Uh-huh.
yeah. But anyway, that's why I also advocate for mental health and seeking help. Kasi you don't want it to come to a point na something like that happens to you. Like, oh, I'm lucky. There were like these two girls who tried to stop me from jumping off. They called me out and they tried to get me off of the ledge. But what if like that hadn't happened? And there have been cases in real life where that didn't happen. In LaSalle too, actually, there was a fairly recent, not fairly recent, like a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Somebody did that and they were successful. So you don't want it to come to a point that happens, and that's why I always encourage people, like whoever it is that comes up to me and says I think I need help. I'm like, you go for it, and I give them the resources if I can, or whatever help it is that I can, provide. I'm not a professional in the psych field because I work in creatives now,
Mm-hmm.
but but having graduated with a psychology degree and having been diagnosed for 10 years already, I do have like a little bit of experience in it, I'd like to say. Um, so yun, yeah, that's my story. We can dive a little deeper in it if you have any more questions. Like I'm free naman uh to talk about it. Kasi I think it's also important to normalize talking about
Yeah.
mental illnesses and diagnoses. Kasi the more that we insert that into everyday conversation, the more normalized it is. Like now, ako at work, there would be times na, kasi my colleagues, they know about my diagnoses. Like there would be times na I would ask for a mental health leave and then they'd know. So parang 10 years ago, that wasn't hindi yun, that wasn't a thing. 'Di ba? So parang now na since then the conversation has increased more and more. It's becoming more and more normalized. It's becoming like hindi na siya parang oh that person has a diagnosis. Parang no, it's just a thing. Una has this or this person has this and then they're fine. So ano yun, yeah.
I gotcha. Dude, I just really want to say thank you for sharing your story because that was really, something else. I guess one of my takeaway was looking back, like as you've said, that became your calling to become an advocate. Like to be that person, someone's rock. Pwede nilang puntahan, and that's really something and special, honestly.
I do what I can. Oh, yeah. Parang yun lang, kasi I was diagnosed with depression also back then eh. I'm I don't want to say recovered, but I'm managing it really well. I don't it's not under my official diagnosis na on paper. Kasi on paper it's OCD and ADHD. So my doctor and we kind of hit a milestone. He was like, I don't think you're clinically depressed anymore,
Oh.
or at least you're managing it well. But back then, it was it was such a horrible experience having depression, and the thought of anybody else going through something like that and and not having anybody, to talk to about it or feeling hopeless. I mean, if there's just at least one person na I can help make feel better and help make them feel like, you're not alone, it's gonna be okay. Like, I'm here, I'm alive, I went through it. It's been 10
Right.
years. So,
So,
you can
congrats
do it
sa'yo.
too. Thank you.
Yeah, we live for another day.
Mhm.
And so
Did you
that's
experience that, Una, na parang there are actual voices that are telling you like, hey, I'm
No.
here. Ah,
That's ano kasi, that's schizophrenia na.
um,
When you hear like actual voices. With my experience, there's this thing that they say about, people who take their own lives or try to, na parang it's not because, they're weak or anything. It's just that they can't find any other way for whatever it is that they're feeling. They can't find a way for that to stop. And that's exactly what I was feeling back then. Like it was at the height of my OCD. Um, I had no idea how to deal with it anymore, and I just felt so alone in it. I it was just me and this monster in my head, and it wouldn't leave, and I couldn't think of any other way to get rid of it than to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what, parang just one day I remember uh, when it happened just so vividly. Like I was in class. Naalala ko pa yung class, global development. And I asked my prof, like, can I go to the bathroom? And I just up and left, and I went for the closest ledge, and I was like, well, you know what? I don't want to deal with this shit anymore. It's just, like we're gonna make a spectacle, but if we do, we're not gonna be alive to see it anyway. So who the fuck cares, right? Sorry, I can cut that out.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Mm-mm.
Oh, na
But yeah.
may tanong ako. So, aside
Hmm.
from your medications and therapy and all that,
Yeah.
like, how did you bounce back from that experience?
Yeah, like how
Okay,
did it
that's
affect your lifestyle and all?
yeah. That's a really great question. Um, what really helped was having a solid support system. Like I really don't think it would have been enough to just have the medication and have the therapy. Kasi, your therapy after an hour, that's done, right? You leave of course, like you have to like reflect on all of these things, but you're just in that office for an hour. Your medication can only do so much also. But it was the people around me talaga, like my family especially. My mom, grabe, my mom was so patient with me. Like she dealt with so much. Talagang, the thought of losing your daughter, diba? Of course, that shakes you. Like, Mom, if you're listening to this, I'm sorry, I love you. But yeah, talagang nag-research siya, and she wouldn't leave me alone. Talagang binabantayan niya ako. I took a leave from school for like a month to recover from that. And even when I went back to school for a month, like sinasamahan niya ako like on the bus, like, and then she would wait sa Taft. She'd stay at a Starbucks or something
Yeah.
and just stay there until, and then samahan niya ako pa uwi. Tas she would encourage me to talk about like what I was feeling, or uh just stuff like that. Like I I don't have enough words. I'm just so thankful for my mom and everybody else who was there to support me, who researched about it, wanted to learn about it, ask me na how can I help you, teach me how. So ayun, I think that's very important in the recovery process, is to have people around you na can support you like that. But at the same time, I know that not everybody has that luxury eh.
Mm-mm.
So, 'di ba, parang ako, maswerte ako, pero not everybody is going to have that luxury talaga. But that doesn't mean that it's hopeless rin. I just want to remind people listening that doesn't mean that it's hopeless. You can find people, and you can find loved ones who will support you throughout it. And if not, it's not, don't give up talaga. Kasi
Mm-mm.
ako, yung story ko, it's not the only story of suicide survival eh. There are people na talagang walang pamilya, walang kahit ano, and they survived it also.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's not hopeless. Ayun.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. If you don't mind me asking then, no, kasi syempre baka may mga nakikinig sa atin na hindi nila alam yung idea, like gusto din nilang magpa-diagnose, gusto din nilang magpa-therapy and all that. Pero like, they don't know how do it. And like, ano yung mga initial steps to do that? Like, 'di ba? Like, paano yung, kung kunyari ako, ano yung dapat kong unang gawin? And ano yung mga initial experiences mo from the first time? Because I'm webbing it from your
Yeah.
word office. Yeah, like, ano yung naging, ano mo, ano yung naging experience mo from the first time that you stepped into that office, and like, what are your expectations? And then,
Okay.
na-meet
Yeah.
ba yun? Ganun.
Yeah.
Okay. Eto, and this is really important. When you first, wait lang, teka, I'm gonna try to, what do I answer first? Parang ang
Yeah,
dami.
it's okay.
Teka, sige, ako, yung first, ano muna, na inano ni Jean, the first thing that Jean brought up, the first steps that you should take is to find a community. Usually people say research, but that's so broad kasi, 'di ba? Parang how do you know if what you're looking up is the right thing? It's hard. So the first step that I would really recommend is finding a community. In this day and age, it's not as hard as it would have been. Facebook talaga, and other social media platforms. Um, yung when I got my ADHD diagnosis, I found this group on Facebook na ADHD Philippines. So groups like that, where everybody shares, their experiences, how they go about things, where people also ask those same questions, like, what if I want to get diagnosed, or I don't know if if I have something, what's the first thing that I have to do? And people are just very supportive in these spaces I've found so far. uh, ayun. So the first step would be to either find a community or find somebody who experiences something similar, who can kind of walk you through it. Pero yun, yeah, that would be the first. Regarding dun sa question ni Jean about the experience in the office, the therapist's office. The thing about therapy and psychiatry. Ito pala muna first. There's a distinction between a psychiatrist and a psychologist. So before we dive in, I wanna clear that up because it's not common knowledge. So, diba, when people think about therapy, or the word psychiatrist, they think about like a long chair, and then hihiga ka doon, and then there's a therapist who's like listening to you talk, right? So that is not psychiatry. That's psychology. That's a psychologist. So that's when you like deal with your emotions, your feelings, your issues. You kind of talk it out. And then in a nutshell, that's it. Obviously, it's much broader than that. That's psychology. That's psychologist. That's a psychologist. Yung psychiatrist, they're some more medical side of things. So they're the ones who they're the ones who give you the diagnosis. They're the ones who administer the medication. They're the ones who try to figure out now, okay, what it is that you have. This needs to be cleared out. The reason I'm clearing this out is because when people try to seek help, kunwari, they go to a psychiatrist and then they expect it to be that long chair nga, where, nakahiga ka, tapos kinukwento mo yung life mo. But no, the psychiatrist, they can do that. But in my experience here in the Philippines, hindi siya how do I say it? Hindi siya, medyo disappointing siya yung psychiatrist trying to act also as a therapist. My very first experience with the first psychiatrist I ever met, hindi ko rin alam yung distinction between the two. I was fully expecting, like I'm gonna talk about my life and my issues and everything, but all they did was just nod at everything I say, like, okay, ganun. And then after like 15 minutes, they were like, okay, here's your medication. I'll see you next week. And I was like, wow, what the hell? Parang, ito ba yun? Is this supposed to be it? And unfortunately, the reality is maraming ganyan sa Philippines. It's very hard to find the right doctor for you. I always say na psychiatrists and also psychologists, they're kind of like teachers or professors. There are a lot of them, but they're not always going to be great, di ba? Meron ka mga prof na parang, king ina, nung ginagawa mo, nagbabasa ka lang sa PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Diba? But then there are also these profs na you meet them and like, whoa, your life is just like, oh shit. So it might take a couple of tries. Ako, it took me like, I think 3-4 tries before I actually found the right one. I've been to probably like 3 psychiatrists. On the third one, that's when I made the shift kasi in college from my previous course, which was organizational communication, to AB psychology. And then that's when I found out about the difference, that distinction between psychiatrists and psychologists. Doon ko lang nalaman. So I was like, shit, kaya pala, they just nod at everything I say and they barely acknowledge me kasi I'm at the wrong place. So that's when I decided to let's look for a therapist, let's look for a psychologist. That's after, I think this was like 2015, so I think around 3 years after my initial diagnosis, doon lang ako nahanap ng right therapist for me and also the right psychiatrist. Yeah, ayun, it's if you don't get it the first try, ito kasi yung kinakatakot ko when people try out therapy and psychiatrists for the first time during your first visit kasi baka you might get disappointed Parang, but the thing is talagang it might take a while before you find a psychiatrist or a therapist that's right for you. There are other people that are lucky na they get it the first try, pero others like me, 4 times.
Yeah.
Pero don't just keep looking. If you're in a position to be privileged enough to keep looking and check out your other options, by all means go. Kasi ayun.
Thank you. I do remember having that same conversation with one of my professors, like what's the difference between psychologist and a psychiatrist, and hearing your experience like solidifies like the importance of it. Kasi yun nga, parang upo ka lang and then they'll just nod, like as someone who had experienced it, like you thought na parang okay, this person understands me, we're in reality, like It's not really that wholesome. Tama ba yung term?
Yeah. Yeah, it was. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. It was terrible. My first experience with a psychiatrist, like, dude, shit, it was terrible, and I felt very patronized. Parang, I was out here like pouring my heart out to this stranger. Because I was like, oh, ito na yun. I've always wanted therapy. I'm finally getting it, and I'm like telling her all of my, lahat ng hinanakit ko, and she's like, okay. You could tell na she wasn't even listening. I also had a psychiatrist before na literally would be texting while I was talking, and it was just very, very disrespectful. And I put up with that for a while kasi parang I think that guy was like my second or my third, and I put up with it kasi parang sabi ko na ay siguro ganito sila lahat. But no, if you find yourself in a situation like that, no, they're not all like that. Talagang if it's not working out for you, just look for another one. And ito rin pala, take note, you don't have to say goodbye to them. Your psychiatrist is like, treat them as any other doctor. Diba? Pag kunwari magpapa-check up ka tapos hindi ka satisfied, hindi mo naman sabihin, doc, di ko trip yung sinabi mo sa akin, magsi-second opinion ako. Diba? You just look for a second opinion. So, meron kasi ako mga ibang friends who also go to psychiatrists and therapists na parang yun yung problem na they can't quote-unquote break up with their psychiatrist. But no, you don't need to. You don't need to. Unless like it's in some sort of contract now, these are the number of sessions that you have to attend, then you were under no obligation to formally quote-unquote break up with your psychiatrist. So, ayun, just life hacks.
Having that life hack. Thank you, Una. With all the things that we've already talked about, like, it's really fruitful because we already talked about your experience before and after being diagnosed with ADHD and OCD, you giving us the importance of distinguishing a psychologist and a psychiatrist. Thank you very much. Thank you. And a little bit of stories from your therapy, and was bad experience and all. So I just really want to go back, right, with the topic of like misconceptions, because you did mention earlier that not all, some of the people in your life treated your mental illnesses as wala lang, like it's just all in your head, like lilipas lang din yan and all. So as you have emphasized earlier, 10 years ago, it was a completely different timeline. But now, everything is, accessible. Everyone is well informed compared, 10 years ago. What can you say about this misconception about, mental illnesses na you're just being crazy or pag-iinarte mo lang yan?
Yeah, I mentioned this in our last session or conversation.
Yeah.
But kasi the thing about the brain is just like, any other organ of your body. It can get sick too. That doesn't mean that anything's, wrong with you. It's just how it is. Your heart can get sick. There are people who take maintenance medication for their heart, for their liver, or their diabetes, diba? You don't tell somebody with a heart disease na, it's all in your head. That's not,
yeah.
Diba? Diba? They take treatment for that. So, just as a person with like diabetes or any other condition, they would seek treatment for whatever it is they have. It's the same thing with mental illnesses. Kasi yun nga, your brain is an organ And what really helps me also, like, kunwari, I get in like a really bad episode of my
Yeah.
OCD.
Uh-huh.
It really helps me when I remind myself na this is just a chemical imbalance in your brain, because that's what mental illness is, eh, most of the time. It's a chemical imbalance in your brain. Na ako, for example, people with OCD or depression, they don't produce the right amount of serotonin and dopamine and oxytocin compared to the average non-depressed or quote-unquote normal person. So what do you do about that? 'Di ba? What if, like, let's say, like, you're born like that, or yun nga, you're dealing with that. Hindi mo pwedeng magicin yun, eh. You can't will yourself to get that right balance of chemicals in your brain, 'di ba? You need medicine for that. You need therapy for that to manage it. It's not as simple as yung my biggest pet peeve na unfortunately until now, people, especially older people,
Mm-hmm.
they say things like parang, just go for a walk, go outside, mag-exercise ka. And parang, you know, if it was as easy as that, I would have done it already.
Yes.
Yun talaga eh. Yun talaga eh. Parang people should just stop thinking about it. If it were that easy na I could just tell myself, don't think about it, it's all in your head, then why would I be going through all of this? 'Di ba? It doesn't mean and it doesn't mean that I'm weak, or I'm like I'm a pussy or whatever. I'm
Yeah.
not strong enough. It just means it simply means I don't have enough serotonin and dopamine and oxytocin in my brain. And if you can't produce your own, store bought is fine. You can buy it. You can buy it. There's mercury drug. And ayun. Um, so it's not a bad thing kasi yun nga ang hirap rin kasi diyan is that there are things around us like media and so many other things that kind of influence us into thinking na, oh, if you take medicine, it's gonna fry your brain. You're not gonna be the same person anymore. What if I go to therapy and they take away my funny? I always hear that. What if I go to therapy and they take away my funny? Dude, I've been in therapy for like 10 years. I'm still funny as fuck. Don't me. Like, oh my god. But yeah, it's not it it helps you. Parang parang yun nga, kung somebody with a heart condition gets to breathe easier if they literally breathe easier if they take medication for their heart condition. It's the same thing with your medicine, eh. Uh, and ito rin pala, for anyone listening in who's considering taking medication, different medicines work for different people. Remember that. Kasi uh it's always like a trial and error process rin, eh. Kasi ako, I remember there was this particular medicine, I forget the name. It didn't work for me. Talagang yung side effects lang, I would just be so drowsy in class. Talagang, and I would still be really sad. Parang walang nangyari. And it just made me like lose a lot of weight. Walang nangyari at all. But this medication worked for my friend like really well. So if you para rin siyang ano eh, there are people like who are in birth control, 'di ba? Or na ganun din. It works different. Like one particular medicine can work well for you, but it might not work for another person. So ganun rin, if you find yourself in a situation na you've been prescribed medication na parang you feel it's not working for you, nothing. nothing's happening or parang lumalala lang, you always talk to your doctor about it, your psychiatrist about it. And if they're not listening to you, then they're not the right psychiatrist. Second opinion. Ayun.
I agree. Thank you. Thank you so much, Una. Like, that was a lot. So, we're already like running out of time because, you won't be with us for too long for tonight. So, I just really want to say thank you for all of the inputs that you have with us. We always love you to have in the podcast. Again, this is not your first time with us. So we already did this before. So, is there anything that you would like to add or you would like to tell our runners as their main takeaway for this episode?
If you find yourself in a position na you think you're not okay, or you have that feeling in your gut na me something, don't ignore it, because you don't want to come to a point na, sad to say, na it was like me. You don't want it to come to a point na you're on the edge of a building about to jump. The earlier it is that you can get help, the better. And the more time that you have to deal with it in a healthy way. So, yeah, what else do I have to say? I would leave my social sana, but
Oh, yes.
yeah. But if anybody has any questions, I guess you can reach me on my Instagram. It's Tuna Babes.
Okay.
So tuna as in century tuna, and babes as in babes.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I'm on private, but you can send me a DM request if you'd like to talk about, you want to talk about it more, or if you'd like any resources on mental health, or perhaps like a list of facilities and services that you can acquire in the Philippines. I do have some recommendations, so you can reach me out for that if you'd like. Yes.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Una. So, thank you. Thank you, runners, for listening to this first episode of the 7 Dimensions of Wellness. We will be right back with you next week for the career dimension. Yes, we will be highlighting Jean's experience on the next episode. So, watch out for that. Thank you. Thank you. But as for this episode, the why and the reason for us having this intellectual conversation is to maintain our curiosity and expand our knowledge. So thank you, Una. Thank you, Jean, for co-hosting with me. And you guys have a great night. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Sorry,
Have a
guys.
great
Have a great night. Bye. And that's it for this episode. If you like to support the podcast, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Runaway Podcast. Subscribe to the podcast, share the podcast, Runaway with Runaway Podcast.